Just a few videos ago, we released a do's and don'ts about winching, covering mostly what you need out on the trail for winching gear and also how to be safe while winching. Well, today we're gonna go through a couple of different, actually 3 different techniques with you guys to show you basically how to do a single line pull, what's called a double line pull, and what's called a triple line pull in different situations while out on the trails to either get yourself out of a stuck situation or to get your buddy out of a stuck situation. One of the most simplest techniques of winching that we'll start with today is what's called a single line pull. Now, if you get stuck in the mud or on the rocks, maybe you get high centered or in a situation where a quick and easy pull is needed, a single line pull is the way to go there. It's always the quickest because you're only pulling out one line, and then what you want to do is find an anchor point. It could be a tree, it could be another vehicle, but it's something that's not gonna move. Now, if it's a tree or it's your buddy's rig, you want to have them positioned or the tree positioned and hook up to it in the straightest line possible, because once you start getting way off angle of your winch, it's going to start creating issues with binding of the winch rope, and you're not going to want to get into that kind of situation. So always try to find something that is as directly straight out in front of you as possible for a single line pull to anchor to. And then if it is a tree, obviously use a tree saver or some kind of static wrap that you can wrap around the tree to hook your winch into. And then from there, it's just a matter of getting back in your vehicle. Don't forget to engage your winch before jumping back in the vehicle, grabbing your remote, and then winching in. Now, it's also important to remember if you are stuck in the mud, especially, is one of the things is to keep your windows rolled down. If it's really deep mud or water, sometimes those exhaust fumes can come back into the vehicle and could potentially cause carbon monoxide poisoning. You don't want that. So just something to keep in mind if you do get stuck in the mud in a situation like that. But a single line pull, it's super simple. It's usually pretty easy to do as long as you have a good solid anchor point that's as straight out in front of you as possible. And then from there, you just winch in. Again, if it's somewhere where you're high centered on the rocks or on a ledge or maybe a trail obstacle of some sort, and you really just need a quick pull to get you over that, then a single line pull is a great way to go. Or if it's an easy situation pulling out of the mud, again, the single line pull. If it is a situation where you are stuck in the mud, one of the easiest things to do to help the winch work yourself out of the mud is to scissor the steering wheel. Have your transfer case in 4 low, have your transmission in first gear, and just lightly get on the accelerator, get on the gas to spin the tires to help, and not go too fast, but you want to spin them just fast enough to help the winch pull yourself out of that stuck situation. Now, if you get really buried into a spot, whether it's mud or it's a rock cliff or some kind of rock garden, and you're really wedged into that spot, this is where a double pull is really going to help you out here. A double pull uses a snatch block, which is a pulley, which is really just a leverage to help take that weight of that load and basically break it in half. So if, let's say, you have a 6,000 pound load on your vehicle, well, if you run a snatch block to an anchor point, whether it's a tree or your buddy's vehicle, and run that cable back to your vehicle, you're basically dividing the weight of that load through both of those lines. So it's almost like doubling the power of your winch. The other thing that's really nice too about a double pull is that you're running more winch line out, because you're running through that snatch block and then bringing it all the way back to your vehicle. And by doing that, you're running more winch line off of the drum of the winch itself. And that's how winches are rated with how much capacity they have to pull, is by just having one wrap of line around the drum. So if you have a 12,000 pound winch, for example, that's with almost all of the winch line pulled out, except leaving at least one wrap on the drum. You don't ever want to go any less than at least about 6 wraps on the drum. With synthetic rope, I wouldn't go any more than having at least a full wrap all the way on the drum, and that's going to give you your most pulling power or leverage on that winch. So with a double line pull, obviously you're pulling out a lot more line and you're utilizing the winch to its maximum potential. So that's if you're in some sort of really kind of a jammed situation, a pretty stuck situation, a double pull's a great way to go. So then what if I'm really stuck in the mud, or you're jammed up on the rocks, or maybe off a side of a hill or something, you really need the most pulling power and the most control as possible. Now, this next scenario, I'll explain in two different ways. I'll explain, one is if you're stuck, and two is if you have a buddy that's really stuck and you're the guy doing the winching. So we can run this scenario a couple of different ways so it makes sense, but it's called a triple line pull. This is where it's going to use the most leverage possible, hooking up to 2 snatch blocks. So you're going to have, let's say you got a buddy that's really stuck in the mud, doesn't matter if he's facing you or facing away from you, and you really have to, you know you're going to have to pull him out with a hard pull. This is where a triple line pull is going to work the best because you're using 2 snatch blocks, which is really almost dividing the weight of that pull into 3, almost tripling your winching power. So how the triple line pull works is by having 2 snatch blocks, and you're going to have 2 straps to anchor the snatch blocks to. So how it works is you run out your winch line. It's going to run through that first snatch block, which is anchored to either your buddy's stuck vehicle or it's anchored to a tree if you're pulling yourself out. Now the winch line is going to come back through that anchored snatch point, and it's going to run through another snatch block, which that snatch block is then anchored right to your vehicle. So you have your winch line coming out, you have your anchored snatch block, you have your secondary anchored snatch block to the vehicle you're pulling or the tree, and then once that winch line comes back around and comes out of that second snatch block, it's going back to that stuck vehicle or that anchor point if you're pulling yourself out. If it's a stuck vehicle, obviously you're going to be pulling them out, whether it's backwards or forwards or whatever it is. But basically that triple line pull is going to leverage the weight and basically divide that weight into 3. So you're going to have, let's say for easy math, for example, you're going to have a 6,000 pound pull, you're going to have 2,000 pounds on each line, basically tripling the amount of power that your winch has, and that's how the snatch blocks work to leverage that extra weight. So now granted, doing it that way takes a lot longer to set up. It also takes a lot longer to winch in. In fact, it's about 1/3 of what it usually is compared to a single line pull. So if you're doing a triple line pull, for every, let's just say 3 feet that you're winching in on the spool, you're only moving about 1 foot. So it takes a lot longer to set up, but it definitely is much better, much more optimized for a situation where you need that more control and that extra power to really get that stuck vehicle out of that situation. So those are the 3 basic, most used, simplistic sort of winch pulls that they are. From as long as I've been doing this and as many times as I've been stuck, it's always either been a single line pull, double, or a triple line pull. In fact, even just this last fall when we got one of our sister companies, Anthem Wheels, we got their Ram Power Wagon stuck. Obviously on an accident, we ended up using a triple line pull and a secondary anchor point behind the winching vehicle, which is a good point now that I'm thinking about it, is if your vehicle does start to slide, even though you might have somebody in there, they're holding the brakes, the transmission is neutral, your vehicle still starts to slide, you may need to add an additional anchor point behind that winching vehicle, whether it be a really big and strong tree that's alive, or another vehicle. And if it is another vehicle, also make sure that their parking brake is on, make sure that they're sitting in the vehicle with the engine running and their foot is on the brakes. Basically give as much stopping power as possible. Same thing with the winching vehicle. Even if you're pulling out another vehicle, you really want to be in that vehicle winching. You want to have the transmission in neutral. You want to have the foot on the brake and the emergency brake set, so that way you're grounding or anchoring yourself as much as possible. So, and then also remember when winching to give the winch a break, let it cool down. So when you're winching in, winch for only maybe 10 to 15 seconds or so, something like that, and then let it cool down for a little bit and just keep cycling it that way, because you can overheat the wires, you can overheat the winch, you can even overheat the battery. Speaking of battery, again, it's important to have the vehicle running that you are using the winch in to help that battery load, to help the power load feed the winch. So it's not just all relying on the battery, unless you're in a remote situation by yourself and the vehicle's dead for some reason, then you have to. Well, that's, emergency situation, but otherwise have the engine running to give as much amperage to the winch as possible. Another thing to always remember is keep everybody away from what I like to call the danger zone. It's just if a winch line does snap and that hook goes flying or something goes flying, it's not going to hit anybody within that danger zone. So that's another important thing to remember. Plus, to always make sure to wear a good pair of leather gloves to help protect your hands in case something does happen. If you can, when you're hooking up your tree saver to your tree or anchor point, if you can avoid using a D-ring shackle, obviously you're not going to have that additional weight that can come flying back at you. Also, with that said, another great thing to have with you is some kind of weighted winch line blanket. Now, they sell weighted winch line blankets, but you can also use a really heavy jacket if you need to. You can always put some rocks in the pockets of that jacket just to help keep that weight down on the winch line. If it does break and it comes flying back at you, that winch blanket is going to catch the hook or catch the line, and it's going to help drive it down to the ground as fast as possible instead of going flying back into the windshield of the winch vehicle. So another great safety point to keep in mind as well while you're out there winching. And guys, I know you can get into situations where it becomes kind of hectic, it becomes kind of chaotic when you're out there winching, but just remember to take your time, go slow. This isn't a race. Take your time, and the chances of somebody getting hurt are going to be a heck of a lot less. So again, just to recap, single line pull. If you're not stuck really bad, if you just need a quick bump over a rock ledge or a rock garden or something like that, or maybe you're not that stuck in the mud, single line pull is a great way to go. If you are pretty jammed up into a situation and only have one snatch block, then the double line pull is the way to go there. And if you're really jammed up and you do have a couple of snatch blocks either in your vehicle or between a buddy and yourself, then a triple line pull is really going to give you the most leverage possible to get yourself out of a really jammed up situation. So other than that, guys, if you do have any questions on different winching techniques or even safety while winching, definitely make sure and let us know in the comments below. Or even if you guys have any really crazy stories to tell us about winching, definitely make sure and let us know. And don't forget to check out our winches, both worn and rough country, right on our website by clicking that link below. And guys, as always, we appreciate all of you for watching and all of your support. I'm Josh from TrailBuilt, and we'll see you guys out in the trails. Hopefully not stopping.